How can extending the idea of personhood beyond the human help deepen our relationship with nature? This is a question we ask all of you, and we invite you to join in the conversation. I'm Addison Brown, and this is the Emerging World Project podcast, What Are You Doing Here? This is a prelude to our next season where we will explore Thich Nhat Hanh's writings in Love Letter to the Earth, finding novelty in nature, and art in our lives. We take a deep dive into how we can live in right relationship with our Mother Earth and why that feels so essential for humans right now. To start off this series, we begin with a conversation with Natasha. This conversation, friendship, and guidance with deepening my own relationship with the natural world has been a bit of a lifeline for me, and I sense it can be for you too. You will find some bits of laughter and some serious questioning, and a lovely invitation to sing to the earth.
Welcome to the show. I'm your co-host, Marley Alabanza. Our guest today is Natasha. Natasha is a mother, a filmmaker, and a teacher of nature practice. She helped to pioneer the micro-documentary genre in humanitarian movements, filming in more than 30 countries and reaching an expansive audiences with her work. Her film, One Word, Sawalmem, was selected by Robert Redford and the Redford Center as a powerful voice at the intersection of youth, indigenous wisdom, and environmental change. Her experiential nature meditation film, Inmenmencia, was selected to be screened in festivals around the world, from Boulder to Buenos Aires to Bhutan, where it won the Audience Choice Award. As a child, Natasha learned some of her most valuable lessons outside the classroom from indigenous people living deep in the wilderness of her native Venezuela. She studied nature-inspired compassion with the Dalai Lama for more than 20 years. She also attended nature-based retreats with Thich Nhat Hanh in his monastery. As a teacher of nature-based well-being, Natasha has taught groups of young professionals from the United Nations, Google, and Airbnb, as well as medical practitioners, politicians, nonprofit leaders, and fellow documentary filmmakers in the US, Latin America, and Asia. Please join us with a warm welcome to our guest, Natasha.
Hello, Natasha, and welcome. I'm going to start by asking where you are speaking to us from.
I'm speaking to you from under the oak tree that I just moved to be in the company of. And this is on Coast Miwok land, which is currently known as the northern part of the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'm looking over the hills right now as the sun is getting close to its setting position, and so there's a very beautiful soft light. The hills are still holding on to their bright green color, which is slowly fading into spring, the drier spring colors. And I'm just sitting here, so feeling so grateful for the love that the Coast Miwok people have poured into this land, and for the relationship that they have had with this land for thousands and thousands of years, and very grateful that the descendants of the Coast Miwok people are continuing to elevate their voice so that more people come into a deeper sense of appreciation for the connection that this land has with the indigenous people.
Thank you. That is a wonderful way to start our conversation. A wonderful way, beautiful setup. I feel so relaxed. I hope we get through this. Uh, so, I feel like you are doing some of the most important work on the planet today. And that work is guiding humans towards a deeper relationship with nature. I want to share a quote that I've heard from you. Your most important job right now is to be in right relationship with nature. Why is that so important?
First of all, I have been known to have said that, and I don't think it came from me. I think this is what I've learned from the land. This is what the land has taught me, and this is what a number of indigenous people have taught me as well. And I'm glad you're starting here because, sometimes when I say this, people think I'm joking. People think that actually the work of being in deep relationship with nature is about escaping the pressures that we are living under in our everyday, and then just going outside and working on your relationship with nature is just like an escape from that real world. But I'm actually not joking at all. When I start looking at all of the challenges that we are facing today as human beings, and I look at the deeper reasons for which we are experiencing these challenges, not only the climate crisis, not only the crisis of when it comes to biodiversity, not only the medical crisis, but also crisis of social injustice and crisis of well-being. Pretty much when you look underneath it all, when you keep going underneath, you come across this broken relationship with nature. And so therefore, as we restore this relationship with nature, we restore everything else. We start to restore ourselves, first of all. And then because of that, we are able to restore everything else. It's very interesting because um, right before connecting with you for this, a friend of mine called me, and she said that a professor at her university had just shared with her today a word that she thought I might be interested in learning. And she couldn't remember the exact word, but she said that the Dene people, otherwise known as the Navajo, the Dene people don't have a word for offender.
Hmm.
Do you know?
Hmm.
Offender, somebody who offends, somebody who causes harm. There's no word for that in the Dene language. The closest to describe that is um, someone who is out of relationship with nature.
Mhm. Wow.
Yeah, and so that's why I feel like being in right and in deep and in nourishing relationship with nature is the most important job of our times. It basically addresses the three main crises we're experiencing: the environmental crisis of planetary well-being, crisis of personal well-being, and a crisis of the well-being of future generations.
Mm. Do you feel like, in thinking about being in a deeper relationship or a right relationship with nature, that there was some point that sort of settled into your awareness?
Yes, I was a very young child growing up in Caracas, Venezuela. And there, if you know anybody from Caracas and you ask them about the river that runs through the city, chances are that they will make a face of disgust. And this is because the Guaire, which is the river that flows through Caracas, has been very mistreated and it has become very sick. And as a child, everyone seemed to accept this as the way it was, and it always saddened me. It always made me feel like, you know, why is everyone ignoring this very ill relative? Why is everyone pretending that this is not happening? And my parents always felt that it was a very important part of our experience growing up, to visit people who still lived on their ancestral lands, indigenous people who still lived on their ancestral lands. And I remember traveling to places like the Gran Sabana and visiting Pemon communities and visiting their rivers.
Mm.
And I remember that my parents used to tell me that I could drink from the river. My father has since told me that he never said such a thing. For some reason, I got the impression that I could drink the water, but it was so crystal clear and beautiful and fresh and amazing and pristine. And for me, it was kind of like arriving to some sort of island of sanity where there were other people who believed that it was important to take care of the river. And so even though I couldn't articulate it in this way until much later, I think that's where my initial sense of this came, that that there was a relationship between us and the river, even if we lived in a very big modern city, that this was still an important part of who we are as human beings.
Mm. The imagery that I conjure up, I'm thinking of a river going through the city, is just a perfect image in terms of where your practice is, or the type of practice that you teach, which is going to bring me to my next question about your nature practice course. If I'm correct, it's part of Stanford University's online courses. I'm curious as to how this came about.
I'm actually curious too. I mean, it's just like, just hearing you say this, it's just so amazing to me. It's actually it was completely surprising and super exciting. When they asked me to teach this course as part of their continuing education program, I taught a 6-week course. And I can't remember the exact name. It was something like nature-centered mindfulness. And it was so amazing because it was the first time I realized, like, oh, wow, maybe this does have the potential to be taken more seriously than I thought. It just felt like such an important wedge into a world that is very much behaving as someone who is out of relationship with nature.
Wow. It makes me think about, well, I want to hear perhaps what response you had from your students, and then maybe if you can share with us, like, the significance of this institution offering such a program.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was a very beautiful group, and it was quite an intellectual group, as you might expect. And there were scientists, there were lawyers, um, and people from a variety of different backgrounds. And I was just so curious about their response to everything that we were doing. And I was just so delighted at how seriously they were taking it and how engaged they were. And it was very interesting because they expressed appreciation for the fact that part of what had disrupted the deepening of their relationship with nature was over intellectualizing. So, some people talk about our intelligences as wings. One wing is our mental intelligence, and then the other wing is our intuitive intelligence. And for the most part, these days, we have overdeveloped our mental intelligence, over focused on the importance of our mental faculties and our ability to be innovative. And so that's one wing. On the other hand, we like barely even mention the word intuitive intelligence. Sometimes it might get mentioned almost by accident, and really for the most part not very seriously at all. And so you can think of it as like a wing that is completely furled in, like tightly curled in. Like I almost think of it as like wet, as if it never got a chance to extend. So we're flying around with this one wing, and like this has us going in circles. And it was very insightful to hear these scientists speak of their experience of noticing this in their own in their own lives. And it was so inspiring for me to have this opening, right? And for me it felt like in doing nature practice together, we can connect at a more at a more fully human level. And I just started to see all sorts of possibilities for this. Like if I were in charge, like this would be the first class. The first class of all students in all universities. Like this would be a major part of the program of K through 12 education. By the time you got to university level, you would be fully fluent in all things nature practice, and you would have the opportunity to take it from there. But in order to get from here to there, at least this should be kind of a foundational course for all humans. Mm-hmm.
Well, you have your work cut out for you. I agree. I certainly agree that this is a work for all humans, which brings me to asking you if you would share with us what are some of the, a couple of simple ways that we might start to get into right relationship with nature.
So one thing that we might do is kind of the same thing that you might do to come into relationship with anyone that you want to come into relationship with or restore relationship with, is you have to spend time with them. That's the first thing. You just have to open your door and get outside. And it doesn't have to be, weekend sort of nature. And it doesn't have to be holiday sort of nature, national park sort of expedition type of nature. I'm just talking about opening your door and just taking a step outside onto your terrace, onto your porch, onto your stoop. I have somebody in the nature practice program currently who's in Kerala, India. She has a tiny little terrace. She can see the sky and she can look out onto one palm tree. There's a lot of honking around, a lot of streets, a lot of urban environment. That's where she does her nature practice. So I'm just talking about the nature that's right around you. So making an effort to be with nature every single day. So, and even if you live in the city and even if you work full time, and some simple ways that you might be able to do this, even if your schedule is already completely overcommitted, is to pick one thing that you habitually do indoors, but that might actually be something you could do outdoors. And that's a way that you can spend more time outdoors as a way to start to come into relationship with nature. So this might even be like a call, like what we're doing right now, taking this opportunity to be under the oak tree and watching the hills and the light as it changes. So something like that. And then the second thing that I would say, and actually as I look up to see who else is here with us, guess who else is here? The moon is right on top of me, which I knew she would be right on top of me because it's the quarter moon. I mean, we call it quarter moon, but it's the half of the moon because it's the quarter of the cycle. But anyway, the quarter moon is right on top of us as the sun is setting. And the second part of the second thing I would say is to see if you what it might be like if you start to consider everyone else who's outside with you as a being rather than a thing. So, and not only human beings, right? That might be a good place to start. Considering all other humans as beings, and then maybe moving on to animals, the crow or the dove or whoever's outside with you, the seagull. And then move on from there into the plant being. So, what might it be like to consider the oak as a being, and the flowers and the shrubs, and what might it be like then to take it further and go into the mushroom and mycelium world. Consider them to be beings. And then maybe into the mineral world, the rocks and the mountains and the water world, and then looking at the moon and kind of all of the planets and the stars. Like what would it be like if you would consider these all your relations, right? As the indigenous wisdom keepers invite us to do. What would it be like? And so those would be two good places to start, because that's basically the foundation of any relationship, is to be with the other and then to consider them a being, because from that, then you have the foundations of respect. Kind of that combination of paying attention leads to respect almost naturally, although you can kind of encourage yourself to experiment with that. And then that naturally leads to love, and that love naturally grows and snowballs and becomes so expansive that that we don't really have any more words to describe it. And so we start reaching for words like, like sacred and divine and these sorts of words. And once you get there, and every step along that journey, you start to get kind of like this feeling in your body, like this warmth in your heart, this inner sense of caring. And you start to realize that what is happening is that you are deepening your relationship with your world. And it's not just your world in terms of like, something on which you step on. And it's not even your world in terms of like your home, although that might be like the next kind of sense that you get. But eventually you get to this place where it's like, oh, it's just like an extension of me. It's like part of me. So, in the sense, like anyone you love, you just feel like they are part of your world, right? We talk about our inner circle of our friends and family that we love the most, like those closest to us, that they feel like a part of us. Then you start to feel this for all of the other beings. And then everything changes from there.
Well, that could be an entire episode about once that gets into motion, when you're out in the world or with strangers, and how you can notice the effects of your own daily practice and how it affects complete strangers, or even the serendipity or it seems serendipitous, but it's actually a result of that. This made me think about young teenagers and the schedules and the pace and technology and such. And I'm wondering how you are managing as a mother to guide a young person along this path.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. I mean, my vision of what high school ought to be these days is basically a place where you can develop fluency in nature practice, fluency in relationship with nature, like as the most foundational skill to be learned. And but the path in which I find myself is, the mother of a teenage girl going to a public school. It's very different from what I had envisioned for a number of reasons. And so I'm left with the question of, okay, so then how do we do this work within this context? And, one thing that I do is I share this with her so that it's a familiar idea for her that these are beings that we are living with on this planet, that it's important to spend time with them, that they have so much to teach us, that we can find ourselves in them. And so I make it a priority to spend time in nature every day. And sometimes that time is together. This morning we had the opportunity to watch the sunrise together. And sometimes that's just like quiet time to enjoy the magic of that, like the good news, like my friend says, the good news of that moment. And other times I might have a few words to say about the importance of this, so that she has a sense of it. And then also making more time for nature on the weekends and more time for nature on holidays. I mean, I just think it's insane. She has to go to school for 7 hours a day, most of it indoors, most of it in classrooms. And then after that, a couple of hours of homework, also indoors. It just seems like it doesn't match our current situation as human beings.
Mm. Mm.
Mm-hmm. But I'm also curious as to why this is my experience. Like, I'm very curious about what it is about this experience that I am meant to learn, or that I'm meant to gain a new understanding from.
Mm.
Yeah, so I'm kind of like holding both of those open at the same time.
So, what do you mean by that? What kind of questions do you ask yourself?
Well, we really use the combination of kind of mental intelligence and intuitive intelligence in terms of deciding where she ought to go to school. And what happened was that the intuitive guidance came in so strongly, so irrefutably, so probably like the clearest guidance that I have ever received in my life was the guidance. And actually, she received it and I witnessed it, that she needed to go to this school. She needed to go to this public school indoors,
Mm.
run by the US government.
Mm.
and and so because of that, I just realized, there was like an inner knowing that this was the right path for her.
Mm.
So what I mean by that is I'm just curious as to why, because it really doesn't match, in this case, my mental intelligence, which tells me, okay, this is what we need. So I'm just curious, like, what is it about this experience that we are meant to go through?
Mm.
Like, how will this lead to our, to her journey, to my journey? Like, what will unfold from here? I'm very curious about it because it was very unexpected. Yeah, I didn't really expect, my vision of high school for her was like to go spend 6 months in an elephant sanctuary.
I vote for that.
And then to go from there. Do you know what I mean?
Right, right. Skip the government school altogether.
I'm
Yeah,
hoping we will have an occasion to go spend a few months on an elephant sanctuary.
I'm on team elephant school, right?
Yes, yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are really fascinating curiosities. You are listening to the Emerging World Project podcast. What are you doing here? I'm your host, Addison Brown. Today, our guest is Natasha. She's a documentary filmmaker and nature practice teacher who helps nature-loving, intuitively curious people restore their calm, clarity, and confidence by deepening their relationship with the earth. Sit tight. We'll be right back. So I want to talk to you about an article that you recently wrote for Yes Magazine. It was titled "How to Transform the Way You Experience Winter." And in it you wrote, "The term I find useful to describe this experience is biological homelessness, where we lose the depth of relationship we long to have with the earth. This condition has been normalized in a modern world that is predominantly disassociated from the natural world, constantly pulling us indoors to the tune of 95% of our lives, onto our screens and away from the truth of who we are." Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah. It's almost as if someone who is a nature loving person, it's almost like considered to be a preference, you know, like some people like luxury hotels and other people like camping. And if you like camping, you must be of the nature loving sort. But that's just a preference. It's like an option. Some people like sports, other like nature. Some people like fashion, others like nature. Some people like whatever, movies, and others like nature. Something like that. As if it's like this one of many interest categories and like an optional category that you may or may not be interested in. The other thing is that if you are interested in that, that's like a hobby or something to experience once your real work is done. So definitely not during the day when you're supposed to be productive, and I'm using air quotes, or possibly for the weekend or for holidays, but it's just kind of like this marginal activity. And the way that I see it is that we are all children of this earth, and also children of the stars. I mean, our bodies, our physical bodies, are made of earth and stars. And for hundreds of thousands of years, we lived primarily outdoors in nature completely. And when we did that, and we considered everyone around us as beings, and we had this deep, loving, sacred, divine relationship with all of these beings, we received a tremendous amount of nourishment from these beings. We received a tremendous amount of satisfaction, of pleasure, of love. And in the same way that when you are romantically in love, that fills you up so much that you don't really need much else, really, right? That sustains you so much that you can get by with a lot less than what you might otherwise think or need. And so what happens is that when we cut off our relationship with nature so severely, as we have done right now. So right now in the United States, like I said, the average person is spending 95% of their life indoors. 95%. And within the remaining 5%, they are counting the time that it takes you to get out of your car and into the next building. So basically, we have cut ourselves off from this vital relationship of ours. And so we are left with such severe hunger pangs, hunger pains that have completely numbed our body. And we look to satisfy them in everything that we do. So we look to satisfy it with work. But work can't, we overwork ourselves, but we can't possibly satisfy that through work. We look to satisfy it through wealth accumulation, but that can't even come close to satisfying that hunger. We try to satisfy it through food. You might try to satisfy it through drugs. You might try to satisfy it through like all these sorts of extreme experiences that we see. Movies are getting more and more extreme, and like video games more and more extreme, and all of these experiences to to try to satisfy that longing that we have, and nothing can come even close. So that's why, yeah, it feels like this biological homelessness, like we've been torn apart from our main source of sustenance and of satisfaction. And so, and it's a very unpleasant feeling at all levels, not only at a physical level, but at a mental, emotional, spiritual level that we may not even realize we're in, because we've been in it for so long. Many people have been in it even since childhood. And so there's like a normalization of this situation, which is actually quite harmful. And this deep sense of dissatisfaction leads to all sorts of destructive behaviors, personally destructive behaviors, but also destructive behaviors in communities, in families, in society, and internationally, at all levels.
Right. Why did you choose winter?
Yes, exactly why. You coming from a tropical country and living in the Bay Area. What do you know of winter? Exactly. That's the same thing I was thinking. It's very funny. One time I
Because I'm
was
sure you could write, I'm sure that this works in terms of all of the seasons. I've heard
Mhm.
people, I don't like the heat, and oh
Mhm.
God, it's spring. I don't understand that one, but
Mhm.
but and winter quite a lot. So I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Yes, yes. Winter was especially surprising for me because what happened was that I was teaching a mini nature retreat in person for a group of people from the United Nations, and we were at the University of Virginia,
Mm.
and the plan was I was actually teaching a storytelling workshop for like impact storytelling and filmmaking. And part of the program was that we were going to have this mini nature retreat. And so the plan was to do it on the, um, like on the lawn in this like courtyard of the university. And it started to snow unexpectedly. It wasn't in the program. It wasn't in the forecast. It just started to snow. And so we used rocking chairs instead of sitting on the lawn. And we found some teacups like to warm our hands and to stay warm. And I changed the program up a little bit so that we would go inside every 45 minutes. It was light snow, but for the most part, we just stayed outside. And I was so delighted. It was my first experience teaching in the snow. And so I just attuned to the gifts that nature was offering us at that time. And at the end of our retreat, in the closing circle, I was asking people how it had been for them. And they started saying things like, oh, I have hated winter all my
Mm.
life. And this is the first time that I can begin to appreciate the gifts that winter might hold for me.
Mm.
And I was so shaken by that comment, that I used to hate winter all my life. I just started thinking about what that meant. And I started wondering how many other people had that experience. And, like already in a situation where you are so torn away from nature, on top of that, to add this layer of, well, 1/4 of the time, I'm actually going to drop into hatred. So not
Wow.
only separation from nature, but actually hatred of the conditions that nature is presenting. And so I just started exploring this theme a little bit more. And I started realizing that one of the happy side effects of nature practice, of this intentional, conscious approach to deepening your relationship with nature, one of the happy side effects of this is alleviating this hatred of winter, which is so painful for so many people around the world. And so that's why I wrote this article, to share. I wrote the article, and I also created like a mini course for Yes Magazine, for the readers of Yes Magazine, to help them with this one particular theme.
Wow, that's another episode too. Wow, wow. Thank you for that. I want to talk briefly about, or maybe not so briefly, about Love Letter to the Earth. First, I want to thank you. We feel very fortunate and grateful to have you participating in the Emerging World Project's presentation of this. What I would like for you to share with us is a little bit about your direct experience with the beloved Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh.
So what I can share is that I didn't come across Love Letter to the Earth until the week when I participated in the 7-day ceremony offered by his monastic community to commemorate his life. That's when I came across Love Letter to the Earth. And each day during those 7 days, I went to one of my favorite places in nature around here, where I think that he would have loved to practice. And I went to do my practice and my ceremony and my retreat in those places. And the day that I came across Love Letter to the Earth, I was sitting by the river. I had gone up to the Russian River, and I was sitting by the bank, and I read the entire love letter, which is actually a collection of letters, to the earth. And I read them out loud, kind of to the river. And as I was reading the letters, I just had this deep sense. It was almost as if he were explaining an experience that I had already had with him, which hadn't been narrated until this moment.
Oh, wow.
So, for example, I remember the first time I had the opportunity to be on retreat with him in Plum Village. And one of his favorite practices was walking meditation. And so the practice was basically to gather together in a circle. And he always liked to start by singing these songs to kind of set the tune and set the tone, set the tune and set the tone.
The tune and the tone. Mm-hmm.
And, beautiful songs like Happiness is Here and Now. And if we were doing this interview like a few years later, I may have been courageous enough to actually sing them on your podcast. But I'll come back another time for that.
An entire episode of you singing Thich Nhat Hanh tunes.
Oh my goodness. And in this particular song, which is one of the ones that he really loved, Happiness is Here and Now, he talks about the importance of slowing down and the importance of I'm here and I'm now and it's right now and I don't have anything. There's no need to rush. There's no need to hurry. And then the walk would begin up the hill. Well, when you arrived to the monastery and you had just come out of the, in quotes, normal life, the experience of going on a walk with Thai, as his students, affectionately call him, Thai means teacher in Vietnamese, is like a whole experience, because he would take one step like this. He would lift his heel, then the ball of the foot, then the toes. And then he would like glide it through the air. And then the ball, the heel would land. And then the ball would be placed. And then the toes.
Oh my
And
goodness.
then came the shift of weight. And then he would start the same thing with the next foot. And this was just for the first step. And you're looking at the hill and you're like, wait, what? And this feeling of discomfort, like a feeling of just like, what is this? And what's the point of going so slow? Like all this stuff starts to come up in you. And it's confusing, because here you are in a monastery on a retreat, because you're looking for this inner sense of peace and calm and clarity and connection. But your body is reacting in rebellion to this like slow motion world that you have just entered in. And that is when you start to get this first sensation of like, oh, you that's the first moment where you notice the treadmill, is when you've come off of it, because there's this sense of like, like when you actually get off of a real treadmill, you lose your balance a little bit, right? There's a sense of like coming back to earth.
Right.
Right. And so
Right.
that's what it's like. And so after a few minutes or a few hours or a few days of this, you start to realize that it's not just some esoteric exercise, the slowing down to this level. It has nothing to do with that. You start to realize that what's happening is that you are witnessing a man who is in a deeply profound state of love. You start to realize that he is so in love with the earth being, the earth mother, with all of the beings, like with every single plum tree that we are walking past, with the birds. He's so delighted with the song, with the lavender flowers that were in bloom in the summer. There's so much love and gratitude and appreciation and just like wonder and magic that he can't do anything but savor every drop of it. And this is how he lived his life. This was my experience of how he lived his life. And then even when we came indoors, and even when he was teaching indoors, or even like when we got to the top of the hill, then came the time for tea. And the experience of having that cup of tea was like a whole other, opportunity to experience this love. It's as if he were like greeting, like he liked to say, he was greeting the cloud in his tea. And there was just such a genuine and remarkable alignment with that love. It was so aligned that it came as a natural expression of who he was. It was not, he was not even necessarily instructing, on these walks that I went with him on. Like in the teachings, he talked about it afterwards. But yeah, so that experience of being with him in that way, and then the love letters, are the explanation of what was going on inside of him when he lived his life. And it was just so moving and like such a huge gift to receive both of those, the experience, like to witness him be in that state, just witness him living his life with so much love in his heart and kind of flowing in that love. And then on top of that, to receive kind of the explanation of what was going on inside of him.
Wow. Were you able to slow down?
Yeah, one of the amazing things about visiting his monastery is that he has created um, these communities of practice and with actual monastic people who live in this way.
Mm.
And so by going on retreat or by visiting, you enter into a community that is living this way. So there's a lot of support for you to slow down. Um, and you actually are able to do that. You are able to, and then what happens is that then you come out of the retreat and you still want to go at that pace and you're wondering why is everyone rushing around so fast? And you start to realize, oh, maybe that's what you were doing when you arrived there. But then the question that I had, the question that I came back with is, how can you continue this without moving to the forest or without moving to the plum grove, without becoming a monk?
Right.
How can you live in this flow of love?
Right. We should be able to without having to live in a cave or become a monastic.
Yes. And so that's what I started to explore with this work of nature practice, is to offer people a sense of that, of how they can engage with nature no matter where they are and feel a whole lot better by doing so. Like restore a sense of deep inner calm, a sense of clarity, a sense of confidence, a sense of courage, of connection. And as they are doing that, become so much more skillful in being able to participate in this work of healing our relationship with the earth.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we found, that it is very much possible to do this.
So we're going to go on this journey of the love letter to the earth. And I want to ask you one more question about that, in terms of what people might consider. Maybe what they might consider after spending time with a reading of one of the letters.
I think there's so many possibilities of what you might do with the letters. One idea would be to do what I did, to make a date with nature and to go to a favorite spot close by and to go read the love letter, or listen, even better. Listen to love letter. Read and listen, and then see what wants to come next. See if you might want to sit to let it soak in. See if you might want to journal about your experience of reading and listening. See if you might want to kind of express your own love to the Earth Mother through your own love letter, which might be a piece of writing, it might be a poem, it might be a song, it might be an illustration, a painting. a mandala with the treasures that you might have in front of you. Love Letter to the Earth is an invitation for you to get into this river.
Yes.
For you to get into this river that is yours. That to get into this river which you absolutely belong to, regardless of your life, regardless of your path, regardless of the good things and the less good things that you have done in your life. You belong in this river. You belong in this flow of nourishment and this flow of love that is not just the love that you are expressing towards the earth, but in the expression of that love for the earth, you immerse yourself also in the love that you are receiving from nature as well. And that is one of the most beautiful aspects of this work, of this piece by Thai, is that basically narrates an experience that has become very foreign for a lot of people, even people who would describe themselves as nature loving people. He narrates not only something that we are all very familiar with, regardless of our label of whether you're a nature lover or not, something that we're all quite familiar with is our love for nature. Like, we all have some sense of what that means, even if we've had very little experience in nature. With, all of us like have a sense that we don't want nature to go away. At that very primal level, there is love. But something that is much more difficult to get a sense of because of the separation that we have experienced is nature's love for us. And that I think is one of the most precious parts of this letter, is that he helps us connect with that in every single one of the letters.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. This has been a really fascinating conversation. Of course, I always love talking to you. We can go all over the place. I'm glad that we stayed on track. So I'm thanking both of us for that. In closing, I think I already know the answer to this, but just for fun, I'm going to ask you anyway. If you had one billboard for all the world to see, what would it say?
I don't know what just came to. I would be curious to hear what you thought it was going to be. I want to know. I would say something like, I don't know, have you sung to the Earth Mother today? Yeah, something like that.
I like that.
What was
Sing
your
to her.
guess?
I thought you were going to remind us of what our number one job is.
Right. That would
But
probably be clear.
I
Yeah.
thought you were going to remind us of our most important job right now is to be in
Yes.
right relationship with nature.
Yes. Yes.
You can have 2
We can have
billboards.
2 billboards. Okay. Thank you.
Sing to her.
Yes, sing to her. That's what indigenous knowledge holders are urging us to do right now, is to sing to her. Just like you would accompany a loved one through their illness, and just your company would make a difference in their healing journey. When you're not feeling well and someone's just there to be with you, it makes you feel better. Well, that's our invitation right now, is to be with the earth. And one of the most intimate ways that we know how to be with a loved one is to sing to them. And so that's the invitation, to sing, and to sing with your voice, even though you might consider it to be, an imperfect song, like my song right now. Or you can sing with, your maraca or your drum or your flute. Yeah, we could make it our practice to sing to the earth every day. I think we would feel the flow.
It's really beautiful. Thank you very much for coming and talking to us. I greatly appreciate it. It's been delightful.
Thank you so much, Addison, and thank you for bringing your light and your beautiful energy into this world. I'm just so very much appreciative of you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you for stopping by. You can help us spread the word about What Are You Doing Here by sharing this episode or leaving a review in your favorite podcast app. Reviews help potential listeners see that our show is worth their time, and every single one makes a difference. For a deeper look at what the Emerging World Project is up to, head on over to emergingworldproject.org. The Emerging World Project studios are on Tongva land.